Hey, it's been a while, but today I'm finally making a new sculpture. And it's going to be another League of Legends one. Okay, say whatever you want about the game or the players, but the lore, the art, the champions, they're all pretty cool. And the champion that I'm making is called Kindred. Kindred is basically two beings and represents the twin essences of death. One is Lamb, a more compassionate half that swiftly kills those who accept their fate, and the other is Wolf, a more brutal side that hunts down those who run from their end.
Never one
without the other.
I want their eyes to light up, so I will use a high temperature wire and solder it with some blue LEDs. I will then wrap this around the metal armature of the sculpture with a thin metal wire. I'm using a special high temperature wire in hopes that I don't burn down the house. I'm sculpting with Polymer clay, which is a clay that needs to be baked to harden, which means the wires and the LEDs will also go into the oven. The temperature is quite low, so a regular wire might also work, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. I'm going to cover the LEDs with translucent clay to shape the eyes and also diffuse the light a bit. Before starting the sculpture, I'll check if the lights still work and start covering the base with clay. I'm starting with Wolf here, since he is the bigger character, and I don't want the sculpture to turn out too large. I should have made him a bit bigger though, because the LEDs in Lamb's face later make it hard for me to make her as small as I wanted, and Wolf ends up looking a bit small. But that's kinda what happens when you do things without planning properly. Wolf's body is somewhere between shadow and fur, so I will add a bunch of long strips of clay and smooth them together in a way that resembles fur but is also kind of shapeless and random. So Wolf represents the violent, relentless side of death. He is the inevitability that no one can escape. Those who fear or reject their end will be hunted down and torn apart. But he's not cruel, he is simply fulfilling his nature, just like any predator chasing his prey. The mouth is also in a way shapeless and shadowy, so I'll make it look sharp and full of teeth, but also soften it a bit by blending them together with thin strips of clay. Both characters wear masks on their faces. Wolf wears a lamb mask and Lamb wears a wolf mask. By wearing each other's masks, Kindred shows that death is never purely one thing. Even in peace, there is a shadow of the hunt, and even in the hunt, there is a kind of destiny. This duality makes Kindred more than just a death god or grim reaper. They are both the final comfort and the ultimate predator. They embody how different people experience and interpret death. It also visually reinforces their inseparability, two halves of the same force. Death isn't just one thing, it's both the hunter and the embrace. Lastly, I'll add a few distinct pieces of fur around his face and go over everything with isopropyl alcohol. This slightly melts the clay and smooths out imperfections. After baking the sculpture, I'll fix up the hole in the bottom with Apoxie Sculpt. The paint job is pretty straightforward. Everything gets covered in a dark purple color, and then I dry brushed it with a lighter purple. I actually quite dislike painting, but I feel it's a bit sad for me to spend days or weeks sculpting a piece and then only spend a few hours on a mediocre paint job. So I want to try putting more effort into painting in future projects and also whip out the airbrush more. I think I've had an airbrush for like 2 years now, and I've used it briefly 4 or 5 times, mostly just for base layers. I went over the translucent eyes with watered down paint to slightly tone them, but not cover them completely. And that's it for Wolf for now. For Lamb, I'll start by making and baking the mask first, so I can make sure the LEDs are in the correct place. Then I'll secure them on with clay and quickly check if I broke anything. So far so good, so I will wrap the wires around the armature just like for Wolf. Lamb represents the peaceful, accepting side of death. She is gentle, merciful, and offers a quiet release from suffering. This reflects the idea that for some, death is a relief, a final rest after a long life, or an escape from unbearable pain. Lamb's weapon is a bow, so I will make it before I make her hands. This way, it's much easier to attach it. I'm using wire for the base shape, so it's nice and sturdy, but no wire for all the other details. The clay I'm using, Cosclay, is quite flexible and durable, so I'm not worried about them breaking later. If you use some other clay, you might want to include an armature for all the smaller details too. After finishing the shape, I'll add a wooden texture. And after baking the bow, I'll add it to Lamb's armature with more wire. A lot of characters in games, whether they are human, animal, or anything in between, are often highly sexualized. A lot of League of Legends champions are. One thing I love about Lamb's design is that while she has a female form, she isn't designed in an overly sexual way. I think it's very fitting for the character. When I'm happy with the overall shape, I'll add small bits of clay all over her body that get blended into a fur texture. She also gets a full head of hair and some last details. Here you can see the extent of my airbrush use, applying a base layer of white paint. Then I'll go over everything again with more white and then a grey, slightly blue wash. I started painting her fingers brown, but the paint coverage wasn't that great, so she just looks like she has been touching the forbidden chocolate, but it gets better, I promise. There are a few different versions that I've seen where her hands are brown, white, or purple. I decided to go with brown, just like her feet. Lamb's mask is painted the same color as Wolf, yet another design choice that ties them together. Her body also has a few light blue markings. I was originally planning to add them on in the sculpting process as well, but I literally just forgot. I've been using the same software to film my videos for years. Then one peaceful day, they decided to suddenly release an update where they switched around the record button for no reason. It took me like 2 days to realize I wasn't recording anything because I was clicking the wrong button out of habit. So here's the finished paint job of Lamb. I also don't have most of the footage for the base, but I made a wonky base shape with the last of Apoxie Sculpt that I had left. As mentioned before, the clay I'm using is a bit flexible, and I don't want the base to be bendy or flexible, so I'm using the Apoxie Sculpt to add a strong core and then adding clay on top. I tried to go for a wooden base with some branches. Sadly, I don't have the footage, but I also incorporated a switch into the clay, and all the wires will be hidden in the middle. After painting the base brown, I'll go over it with a dark brown wash, and then glue the sculptures in with 2-part epoxy glue. I drilled holes into the base so I could stick the wires through and hide them, as well as provide better support for the sculptures. The base was looking a bit empty, so I glued on a bunch of grass tufts. And covered their eyes with UV resin for a more realistic, shiny look. Now the last thing to do was solder everything together, check if the lights still work, and hide everything in the base. I was thinking of doing a more simple, messy soldering, but ended up going with I think it's called a perf board. Don't come after me, soldering bros, okay? My soldering iron's tip was very old and dysfunctional, so the soldering is very messy, but it got the job done. Barely. I was originally going to hide the battery pack inside the base, but now I had to put the board in there, so I made another part for the base to hide the battery pack in, and connected the 2 parts with magnets. And that's it.
Lamb, tell me a story.
There was once a pale man with dark hair who was very lonely.
Why was it lonely?
All things must meet this man, so they shunned him.
Did he chase them all?
He took an axe and split himself in 2.
So he would always have a friend.
So he would always have a friend.
Thank you to my wonderful patrons for sticking around, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!